advisors, I'm super excited to introduce you to Elements in Real Life. This is a series of videos we're putting together to help you better understand how to do financial planning with Elements. Each week, Elements advisors will take real client questions and show you how they use the vital signs to provide real advice. So check it out, and of course, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another Elements in Real Life. My name is Brandon Galici, founder of Galici Financial, and I'm here with Becky today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm Becky Wash. I'm from Oak Maple Finance here in Northern Vermont.
All right, today we've got a fun question. Many of us have probably been asked before, especially in today's climate. Should I buy or should I stay renting? So Becky, I know that this is a conversation that you are literally having with a client, or you've already had it with a client this week. So when we talk about elements in real life, this is very real life, especially for you right now.
Yeah, it is super real life for me. So yeah, this client, mid-30s, and they are working their way up in their career, and they are renting. And they're looking at, should I buy right now? This market, specifically in Vermont, it's a really tough buyer. It's a seller's market. So that is one factor that doesn't show up in the scorecard, is that we know that it's a seller's market.
Sure.
And so it's going to be harder for a client to find a property. And then also with the interest rates as high as they are right now, that's another competing factor. So I will share the scorecard as I'm doing that. One of the things I did early in my career was, for fun, I built this really complicated spreadsheet to weigh all of the rent and buy questions, down to the how much are you paying for utilities and how much are you building your equity, and hundreds of data points. And I shared it with a friend, and she stared at it and her face glazed over, and she's like, I'm gonna buy. I'm like, all right, cool. And even though the spreadsheet said, actually, it's gonna be a little bit better for you to rent in this particular circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
So what I love about Elements is that we can get at a lot of those points just looking at the very simple scorecard. So to start with, we can focus on the bottom row, the assets row, the term row. This client's net worth is 80,000. Most of that is in his qualified term. That is his retirement accounts. He has set up a solid savings strategy. He is only saving about 3% right now of his salary, so we might want to think about increasing that. As you see, real estate term is currently 0 because he is currently renting. The question is, should he continue renting or should he buy? And his total term is 1.6. So he's an early accumulator. He is someone who is starting to lay the foundation for those really solid habits, but is still pretty low in that total term. And again, reminder that total term is the relationship between net worth and spending.
Yeah.
So Brandon, you have now looked at this scorecard just as long as everybody who's watching this video. What jumps out at you when you're looking at this term row?
Yeah, I think what I'm looking at first is the liquid term, because we're looking at this through the lens of, is this person able to buy? And right now, with a liquid term of 0.3, so his cash plus after tax investments divided by his spending, like 4-ish or so months. So this is something that I'm really looking at, because we want to make sure that we have a healthy liquid term score once we factor in whatever his down payment would be, and then also, I think almost even more importantly, because this often gets overlooked, all the closing costs. And when you buy a new house, what do? You get new furniture, and all of these different expenses be well above and beyond simply the down payment. So I really want to make sure that his liquid term would be healthy after factoring in those down payment and other house expenses. So that's the first thing that jumps out to me on the term row.
Absolutely. And what's been cool is to see this term move from 0.1 to 0.3 over the months that I've been working with him. That's been neat to see how he is as he's thinking about his spending, as he's thinking about the relationship between his income and expenses, to see him growing that liquid term. And what I told him is, I want to see this before we start the house buying conversation. I want to see this at 1 to 1.5. It's okay if it's going to drop down when you do buy the house, because we do, when we make investments, we take some risk on that. But one of his goals is going to be moving it in that direction. because what we want to do, even if he could get a 0 down payment mortgage, which, you know, could be possible, or 5% down payment, if he had the down payment gifted to him from family or something like that. What we're going to be doing, and if he is to buy, is to move liquid term into real estate term. That's going to be
Right.
the transaction. Total term's not going to change much because he won't be decreasing the total value of his assets, but it's going to be moving from liquid term to real estate. And to your point, those closing costs, I remember when I bought my first home, I was surprised that I had to buy a vacuum cleaner. Just like, how did I not know I needed a vacuum cleaner? But they're just
Yeah.
things that you living at home, you don't think about needing. And when you own your own home, suddenly you need a hose. Who knew that you had to buy a hose? You know, there are just all these pieces to be thinking about. So yeah, the liquid term here is not solid enough yet to consider moving any of it over to real estate term, but I've seen it moving in the right direction. And so the conversation is going to be, how can we over time increase that liquid term?
Yeah. And Becky, I think that's super helpful context there as well, that because obviously this is your client, you're working with them on an ongoing basis, which I know you and I both agree it's the planning, that ing, that active nature of it. Because for me, I don't have that context. Right. So it's like, well, has this been stuck on 0.3 for quite some time? But no, you've noticed this trending up. So he might be able to buy a house sooner than someone else who has a liquid term of 0.3 because you're seeing this number trend up. And then also too, I think you gave really healthy context for just how this decision is made in general, where really what we're doing is we're just shifting things around on the balance sheet, which means we're shifting things around on our term score, right? It's not really a huge positive or negative or a decrease rather. It's just, hey, we're shifting from liquid term and we're putting that in our real estate term bucket. And I think when we think about things that way, it really helps the client understand I'm not necessarily quote unquote spending money, even though it feels like, because we're going to have less cash in the bank, it might feel like things could become a little bit tighter or feel like we have less money. Ultimately, our balance sheet or our net worth didn't really change. And I think this is just a really, really simple way to explain that in 30 seconds like you did.
Yeah, and something I want to point out too, though, is that the denominator of these rates, the terms here, that is spending, and it's very likely that in purchasing, that total spending number is going to go up because there's going to be property taxes, there's going to be home maintenance for, targeting around 2% of the value of the home. There's going to be insurance. Homeowners insurance is far more expensive than renters insurance. So
Right.
the spending number is going to go up. So overall, the numbers in the term row are going to shift down a little bit. And then you made the point of closing costs. That's going to take a little bit off of the numerator here. So because, that whole spreadsheet I made 20 years ago of, should I buy or rent, with all of those different factors, each of those factors is going to impact either the denominator or the numerator of the term row. But the biggest question that people have of like, wow, can I afford to spend this $400,000 on a home? There's not $400,000 anywhere in here. It's the amount of the equity that is just shifting from one bucket to another.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And I think you were getting ready to highlight the cash flow row here.
Yeah, getting ready to highlight the cash flow row here to show that we do have some space. So the equilibrium that we're looking for is this whole row to add up to about 100%, where your savings plus burn rate plus debt rate plus tax rate is 100. When it's not there, there's reasons for it not being less than 100. And we have to get to know the client and understand what that reason is. Is it because we have the wrong annual spending number? And that actually their burn rate is higher? Often that's the case. Is it because we don't have the right income number? Or is it because the client really has money that's going into liquid term, but not with any intention? So the savings rate is what we're deciding to be saving, typically into qualified term, but it could be into liquid term. And the debt rate is, that's already designated. Tax rate is already designated. So could it be that the rest that needs to add up to 100 is going into liquid term. And yeah, it is. I've seen this grow over the months we've been working together.
Yeah, and that's super helpful, because then now you'll be able to have that conversation with a client, and then, okay, well, approximately how much is going in, and you can help them be intentional. So it's awesome in this case that the liquid term has just been growing, even though it almost hasn't been accounted for in our cash flow row here. But now it's when there is intentionality, maybe the savings rate is closer to 10%, which again is going to get him a lot closer to being able to afford a house in the next couple of years if he has this trend. And then another thing that I wanted to point out on this row too, while we're here, the other big factor in the buy versus rent is definitely going to be that debt rate. Right. And in this case, if it's at 4% right now, there's a lot of wiggle room from a payment perspective, because again, each situation is a little bit different, but just general guidelines. I think once that debt rate gets above 30%, things start to feel a little bit tighter, a little bit stretched. So we'd want to see, once he does have the adequate liquid term, okay, what is that monthly payment going to look like? What does that do to the debt rate? And then someone might think, at first, okay, well, what's going to happen if he's spending almost 70% of his income? Well, right now, spending is going to be significant, or burn rate's going to be significantly higher because of why? He is renting, right? So if and when he does purchase, we're going to shift a percentage from burn rate, and we're going to shift that right over into debt rate. So again, that's another nice nuance that you can pick up in elements in essentially an instant, and be able to see this person, if they also owned a home and their debt rate was 25%, this burn rate's insane. But because they're renting, not a problem. If their burn rate's fine, their savings rate's healthier than what's even shown here, and their debt rate is very low, we're able to say, hey, this burn rate is okay. Even though if we just saw burn rate, we might say, oh, that's a red flag, but not whenever we're able to have it in context with the other three cash flow elements.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love, one of the things I love about these elements in real life episodes is that the advisor who isn't familiar with the client situation is able to say, here are questions I'd ask. Here are things I'd be looking at, and pointing out things you've never seen this card before. That's one of the beauties of the element scorecard.
Yeah. And we're looking at the same things, right? Like we're coming to the same high level conclusions, and you're already asking these types of questions. And again, I think that's one of the things that is so powerful about elements is how are we trying to standardize this advice, where we've got two CFPs here, and everyone's going to do things a little bit differently, but we can look at this high level and objectively and be like, hey, here are the questions that I'm going to be asking, or hey, these are the specific two elements that I really am going to be focusing on for this conversation. And now I feel like this is really able to move the profession forward, because we're able to have these quick conversations. Or say that you just wanted to get feedback, and in this case it was pretty straightforward, but say you wanted to get some feedback, you've got a ton of other elements advisors who we'd be able to chit chat about this conversation. Oh, have you considered asking this question? Oh no, actually I haven't. Or have you considered this? And then be able to really dive much deeper, versus, well, does this change his Monte Carlo from a 97% to a 94.6? It's like, or what did the 100 data point spreadsheet say? It's like, it's not probably not helping anyone make a decision. But
and then it lets us have the conversation with the client, and that's what gets me so excited, is the client gets it. Client's like, oh, okay, I got to build liquid term to 3%, or to 3 years. How do I do that? Oh, I've got to build my cash savings. Okay, how can we get it there faster? Oh, I can be, then the clients get it in a way that our previous process gave us that glazed over look that all financial advisors are familiar with.
Yep. And then now they're bought in to the process, because they know their specific next actionable step and why. Hey, I have a purpose behind saving more money into liquid term. I want to buy a house in a couple of years, and this is how I do it. Versus Becky's just saying I can't buy a house. Like, no, that's not what we're saying. It's, hey, you can buy a house when this happens. Here's that action plan. And again, that's where you're getting that behavioral change, versus save more money. Okay, well, that alone is good advice, but it's not helpful. It's not getting anyone to take action, versus, hey, here's why. And then now it's their why, it's their purpose, and they're going to take that action. And in fact, you've already seen the liquid term increase over the last 6 months or so, you said. So this is incredible.
And more nuance here is, knowing our clients. I can also say, I know where you are in your career and what your profession is. Now is not a great time because of interest rates, and because there's not a lot of supply, and because who knows where you're going to be in 3 years. So let's use this uncertain period to grow that liquid term.
Yeah, so good. Hey, well, anything else, Becky?
I think that's it. Thank
Awesome.
you,
Well,
Brandon. Thanks for your great question.
this was so much fun. And make sure that for the advisors listening, if you haven't already checked out Elements, there should be a link below to book a demo, and then you can be having even more meaningful conversations with your clients, just like Becky and I had. So thanks for watching another Elements in Real Life episode, and we will catch you next week. See you then.
So, what did you think about that? We'd love to hear your thoughts about how we answered that question. Do you think that you would have answered it differently? Comment below and let us know. Now, if you have a scorecard that you want us to dissect, or a client question you want answered using Elements but aren't sure how, send us the client's one-page plan to cs@getelements.com, and we hope to catch you next time.